and good day to all. Our lesson today will be on nitrogen. This note is based on the reference by John L. Havlin in 2014 entitled Soil Fertility and Fertilizers. At the end of this topic, you should know about the nitrogen cycle, the nitrogen transformation in soil, which are the sources, the process, and also the losses path, the forms of nitrogen in soil, the forms of nitrogen in plant, the functions of nitrogen in plant, and also the symptoms of the nitrogen deficiency in plants. This is the chapter outline. The nitrogen constitutes about 78% of the Earth's atmosphere and exists in form of the nitrogen gases. These nitrogen gases must be converted to plant available nitrogen through the microorganisms that live symbiotically on the legume roots or by the free-living or non-symbiotic soil microorganisms. It can also be converted into plant available nitrogen through the atmospheric electrical discharges from the forming nitrogen oxides and also from the manufacturing of the synthetic nitrogen fertilizers. This figure shows the nitrogen cycles in the atmosphere, in the soils, as well as the uptakes by the plants. As you can see, there is several processes involved in the nitrogen cycles, and it involves different input and sources of the nitrogen. Let's have a look on the sources of nitrogen, which is the input of the N. The input of the N comes from the fertilizer, plant and animal residues, as well as from the nitrogen fixation process. Let's have a look on the input one, which is through the nitrogen fixation. The nitrogen fixation process can be divided into two, which are the biological nitrogen fixation and also the non-biological nitrogen fixation. The biological nitrogen fixation involves the process of the symbiotic and also the non-symbiotic fixation, and the non-biological nitrogen fixation involves the electrical discharge by the lightning and also the industrial processes. The first one of the biological nitrogen fixation, which is the symbiotic nitrogen fixation by the legumes. When the legume root growth begins, the nitrogen-fixing bacteria, such as the rhizobium, in soil invade the root hairs and then multiply. These nodule bacteria fix about 25 to 90% of the total legume nitrogen, and it prefers the soil nitrogen in form of the nitrate and ammonium because it requires less energy than to fix nitrogen. Soil acidity can restrict the survival and growth of these bacteria in the soil and severely affect the process of nodulation. The primary reason for including legumes is to supply the nitrogen into the soil. This figure shows the rhizobium species which fix the nitrogen in the legume. This is known as the rhizobium symbiosis. For non-symbiotic nitrogen fixation, this process usually occurs with a certain strains of free-living bacteria and blue-green algae. The amount of the nitrogen fixed by this organism is much lower than those that fixed by the symbiotic nitrogen fixation. The industrial fixation of nitrogen is based on the Haber-Bosch process, where the hydrogen and nitrogen gases react to form the ammonia. The examples of the free-living bacteria which involve in the non-symbiotic nitrogen fixation is including the Azospirillum brasiliensis, Azotobacter, and also the Clostridium, whereas the blue-green algae such as the Annabeda azola shows the symbiotic relationship between the azola, which is the water fern in the tropical wetland rice. The azola and Annabeda nitrogen-fixing association has supplied approximately 105 kg nitrogen per hectare per season, or about 35% of the nitrogen requirements of the rice. Next, let's have a look on the non-biological nitrogen fixation. First, we have the atmospheric additions, in which the small amounts of nitrogens come from the rain or the snowfall, and this end is fixed by the electrical discharge of the lightning in the atmosphere as well as in the industrial pollution. Then we have the synthetic or industrial processes of the nitrogen fixation. This industrial fixation of nitrogen is the most important source of nitrogen as a plant nutrient. This is based on the Haber-Bosch process in which the hydrogen and nitrogen gas react to form the ammonia. This ammonia produced can be used directly as a fertilizer, as the anhydrous ammonia, or as the raw material for other nitrogen fertilizer products, including the ammonium phosphates, urea, and ammonium nitrate. The inorganic nitrogen sources, which is in the form of the fertilizers, usually comes from the anhydrous ammonia, which is the basic building block for almost all chemically derived nitrogen fertilizer materials. For example, we have the ammonium sulfate, we have the ammonium nitrate, nitrogen solutions, we have the urea, as well as the ammonium phosphate. These are the examples of the inorganic nitrogen sources, which is in the form of the fertilizers. We have the ammonium forming sources, which are the urea, anhydrous ammonia, ammonium nitrate, ammonium sulfate, and etc. We also have the nitrate forming sources, which produce the ammonium nitrate, sodium nitrate, and potassium nitrate. We also have the slow release compounds, which is in the form of the urea formaldehyde and also isobutylidene diurea. And then we have the controlled release compounds, in which the sulfur-coated urea and also the polymer-coated urea. Lastly, we have the input tree, which is coming from the organic nitrogen sources. The organic nutrients are classified by their source and effects on the soil and target plant. This source refers to the animal or plant-based material, and the effects are characterized by the materials that can improve the soil condition and have a stable organic base with a low nitrogen content and high nitrogen mineralization potential, for example, the compost and also the peat. We also have the materials with short-term nutrient supply, which have the relatively high nitrogen content and or readily mineralizable organic nitrogen content. For example, we have manures and also the biosolids. Next, let's move to the nitrogen transformation, which is the process. The main process involves the immobilization, mineralization, and also the nitrification. Nitrogen mineralization is the conversion of the organic nitrogen to ammonium through two reactions, which are the aminization and also the ammonification. The aminization converts the proteins in the residues to amino acids, amines, and also urea, while the ammonification further converts the organic nitrogen compounds into inorganic ammonium. The ammonium produced is subject to several fates, which is either it will be converted to the nitric and then followed by the nitrate through the nitrification process, or it may be absorbed directly by the higher plants through the nitrogen uptake, or it can be used by the heterotrophic bacteria for decomposition process, which is the immobilization process, or it may be fixed as biologically unavailable nitrogen, which undergo the ammonium fixation, or it can be converted to the ammonia and released back to the atmosphere through the volatilization process. This figure shows the aminization process in the nitrogen mineralization. In this process, the proteins is converted into the amino acids, amines, and also urea. This figure shows the ammonification process in the nitrogen mineralization. After the aminization, the process further converts the organic nitrogen compounds into the inorganic ammonium. The next process is immobilization. The immobilization is the conversion of the inorganic nitrogen, such as the ammonium and nitrate, into organic nitrogen. If the decomposing residues content is low in nitrogen, the microorganisms in the soil will immobilize this ammonium and nitrate in the soil solution. If the added organic material contains high nitrogen, the immobilization will not proceed. This is because the residue contains sufficient nitrogen to meet the microbial demand, and the inorganic nitrogen will increase from mineralization of the organic nitrogen in the residue. Let's have a look on the CN ratio effects on the mineralization and also the immobilization process. The CN ratio defines the relative quantities of these two elements in the crop residues and other fresh organic materials, soil organic matter, and also in the soil microorganisms. The process of mineralization and immobilization is highly depends on the CN ratio of the organic matter being decomposed by the soil or microorganisms. The table shows the CN ratio effects on the mineralization and also immobilization. For the residues with the wide CN ratio, such as the hay, the straw pine needles, corn stalks, dry leaves, and sawdust, the process occurs will be the immobilization. This is because of the high carbon content in the residues. If the CN ratio is in between of 20 to 30, the process of the immobilization is equals to the mineralization. If the CN ratio is less than 20, the process is the rapid mineralization. For example, the residues with the narrow CN ratio is the alfalfa, clover, manures, biosolids, and immature grasses. The graph shows what happens when the organic material with high CN ratio, such as the rice straw, is added to the soil. The graph is divided into the three time periods. The initial phase is the net immobilization, in which the number of microbes are increasing, and these microbes consume the ammonium, causing it to decrease. These microbes is also consuming the carbon products and release the carbon dioxide, and then this will cause the CN ratio decreasing. The intermediate phase shows that the microorganisms have consumed most of the available nitrogen, the maximum consumption of the carbon products and production of the carbon dioxide. The final phase shows the net mineralization, in which these microorganisms are drying. The ammonium level is increasing, and the ammonium that was part of the microorganisms is now available in the soil. The carbon compounds are also decomposed, and the carbon dioxide production is low. Hence, the carbon to the nitrogen ratio is also low. The next process is the nitrification. A major portion of the ammonium produced from the mineralization is converted to nitrate through the microbial oxidation, or also known as the nitrification process. The biological oxidation of the ammonium to the nitrate in the soil is known as the nitrification process. The two-step process where ammonium is converted first to the nitrate and then to the nitrate by the two autotrophic bacteria in the soil, which are the Nitrosomonas and the Nitrobacter. The process is shown in the step 1 and step 2 and also the net reaction of the final products. During nitrification, 2 hydrogen ions are produced for every ammonium ion that is oxidized. These hydrogen ions will accumulate and significantly reduce the soil pH. Thus, any ammonium-containing fertilizer will ultimately decrease the soil pH due to the nitrification process. The factors that affect the nitrifications include the supply of the ammonium, the population of the nitrifying organisms, the soil pH, the soil aeration, moisture, and also the soil temperature. Next, let's have a look on the nitrogen losses, which is the output for nitrogen process. In the figure, the N losses shows by the red circle, which are the ammonium fixation, the plant uptake, volatilization process, denitrification process, and also the nitrate leaching. First, let's have a look on the nitrate leaching. The nitrate is very soluble in water and not strongly adsorbed to the cation exchange capacity. It is very highly mobile and subject to leaching losses when both soil nitrate content and water movement are high. The major pathway of the nitrogen loss in humid climates and other irrigated crop systems are via nitrate leaching. It must be controlled due to the impact on the environment. The applying of the nitrogen synchronous with the periods of high crop and demand can reduce the nitrate leaching. Some of the factors that influence the magnitude of the nitrate leaching losses are the rate, time, source, and the method of nitrogen fertilization, the intensity of cropping and the crop nitrogen uptake, the soil profile characteristics that affect the percolation of water, and also the quantity, pattern, and time of the precipitation or the supplemental irrigation. The next losses of nitrogens is via the ammonium fixation. Certain clay minerals such as the vermiculite and mica are capable of fixing the ammonium and replaced with the cations in the expanded lattices of the clay minerals. The figure shows that the ammonium is replacing the potassium in the clay minerals. The next losses of the nitrogen is via the denitrification. Denitrification is the loss of nitrogen in form of the gases. In some cases, when the soils become waterlogged, the oxygen is excluded and the anaerobic conditions occur. Large populations of the denitrifying organisms exist, such as the Pseudomonas, Bacillus, and Thiobacillus denitrificans. The factors affecting the denitrification include the soil drainage, which are the moisture and aeration, the amount of the soil nitrate and also nitrate, the amount of the decomposable organic matter, the soil pH, and also the temperature. Finally, the losses of nitrogen through the volatilization of the ammonia. The volatilization of ammonia is the nitrogen loss in form of gases. Ammonia is the natural product of the nitrogen mineralization, of which only small amounts are volatilized compared to the ammonia volatilization from the surface applied fertilizers and manure. The reversible reaction is shown as in the equation. The factors affecting the volatilizations are the soil pH, buffering capacity of the soil, the environment, the amount of the surface crop residues, the nitrogen sources such as the fertilizer and manure nitrogen, and also types of the nitrogen placement. Next, let's have a look on the forms of the nitrogen in the soil. Nitrogen in the soil exists in two forms, which are the organic nitrogen compounds and also inorganic nitrogen compounds. The organic soil nitrogen occurs as proteins, amino acids, amino sugars, and other complex nitrogen compounds, whereas the inorganic nitrogen compounds includes the ammonium, nitrate, nitrous oxide, nitric oxide, nitrogen dioxide, and also the elemental nitrogen. Forms of nitrogen in plant. Plants contain 1 to 6% of nitrogen by weight and absorb nitrogen as both nitrate and also ammonium. In moist, warm, well-aerated soil, solution nitrate is generally greater than ammonium, and both move to the plant roots by the mass flow and also the diffusion. The functions of nitrogen in plant. The nitrate reduction involves two enzyme catalyzed reactions that occur in roots and also in leaves. Both reactions occur in series so that toxic nitrate does not accumulate. It is shown in the step 1 and step 2. The ammonia produced is assimilated into amino acids that are combined into proteins and nucleic acids. In addition to the formation of proteins, nitrogen is also the integral part of the chlorophyll. A single magnesium atom is bonded in the center of each porphyrin ring. The nitrogen supply are associated with the high photosynthetic activity, vegetative growth, and also producing the dark green color of the plants. The nitrogen supplies influence the carbohydrate utilization, in which under low nitrogen, the carbohydrates will be deposited in the vegetative cells, causing them to thicken. When the nitrogen supplies are adequate and conditions are favorable for growth, the proteins are formed from the manufactured carbohydrate. These figures shows the chlorophyll molecule and also the porphyrin-like ring structure in the plants. Next, let's move to the nitrogen mobility and the deficiency symptoms in the plants. In the plant, the nitrogen is very mobile and it can move from older plant tissue to the new tissue. If the nitrogen is deficient in plants, the older leaves often turn yellow-green or yellow first. As the deficiency progresses, the entire plant will yellows. The plants will become stunted, have a slow growing, and produce a chlorotic plant, and it will result in the reduction of yield, and the plants will be more susceptible to the weather stress and diseases. This figure shows the guide to the nutrient deficiency symptoms. As we can see, the nitrogen will cause the yellowing that starts at the tips and moves along the middle of the leaves, as shown in the red ring. This figure shows the effects of the nitrogen deficiency in the plants. The first figure shows the nitrogen deficiency symptoms in the rice, in which the matched leaf, which is the lower leaf, turns into yellowing color and produce a chlorotic symptoms due to the nitrogen deficiency. The second figure shows the nitrogen trial on the rise. As we can see, the low amount of nitrogen produce a light green color compared to the sufficient nitrogen fertilization. It is compared using the leaf color chart.